little bit of a delay between when we actually hit live and people start tuning in. Now you see that number in the upper left corner there. Right now we don't have anyone with us, but ideally we'll have people tuning in. Boom, there we're at 18 already. So good to see folks tuning in. Hey, I'm Jon Macaskill, and I'm going to turn it over to Ken here in a second. But before I do that, if you feel comfortable doing so, I'd love to hear how you guys are feeling. Put something in the chat. We're here on YouTube. You can put it in chat, how you're feeling. And what I mean by that is how you're feeling in your body, your mind, and your nervous system. In your body, do you feel some tension, pain, like anger manifesting as tension or pain? In your mind, do you feel settled or do you feel rattled? And in your nervous system, do you feel settled or rattled? And the way, the kind of metric that we use to break that down is a stoplight chart. So are you red? Are you all over the place? Are you yellow, kind of mellow yellow in the between? Or are you really calm and chill in both or in all three, your body, your mind, and your nervous system? And that's green. So, if you feel comfortable doing so, go ahead, throw that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And while we wait for some other folks to tune in the next minute or so, before I get started in the full presentation, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Yeah, thanks, John. So you already know that I'm in the red because I don't like public speaking, but I am super excited about this. So for those that don't know me, I'm Ken Gracia, the founder and co-chair for the Fresh Vets ERG. I've been with HelloFresh for a little over a year and a half, the associate director for maintenance based out of the Newark location. So John here, Jon Macaskill, is a retired Navy SEAL commander turned leadership and mindfulness coach. He spent 24 years in the Navy, serving in a variety of positions, multiple highly dynamic leadership positions from the battlefield, operations center to the boardroom. He's got a teaching leadership style that is unconventional but highly effective. He's super passionate about helping people and organizations become the very best versions of themselves through mindfulness coaching, keynote speaking, and grit and resilience training. Additionally, John happens to be a fellow member of the great United States Naval Academy class of 2001.
Alt one, baby.
Our Alt one, indeed. Our class motto was Nova Millennium Fabricari, which translates to forging the new millennium. Little did we know that when we entered the Naval Academy in July of our plebe year back in '97, what was going to happen in the world over the next couple of years as we were getting ready to graduate. Obviously in 2000, we had the bombing of the USS Cole. And then very shortly after our graduation in May of 01, we all know what happened in September of 01. Kind of the landscape of all of our worlds changed. John was, I don't know if you were already at Buds or getting ready to head to Buds at that point.
Sure enough.
But I don't want to take up too much time. I think, John, I'm not on the YouTube link, so I can't see who else there because I didn't want to make an echo. So
you're good. Well, I see 29 people logged on, which is great. And, for those who are not available now, they can tune in later with that same link. So excited to be here with you.
Yeah, this is awesome. So I'm going to shut up now, John. I'll go ahead and let you get started. If folks trickle in, again, the video will be available for people to watch later on. So I'm going to go on mute, and I'll let you take over, sir.
Okay. All right. See you in a second, man.
You bet.
Well, thank you, Ken, for that intro. I'm going to go ahead and start up a presentation for you, but I'll try not to bore you with PowerPoint. I know as veterans, we've all done the death by PowerPoint, but I do want to have some slides so that you don't have to stare at my mug the whole time through this presentation. So I'm going to put this up. Ideally, we'll put it up side by side. So you've got both, but at least I'm smaller than I was prior to. That said, I'm going to go ahead and jump in to this presentation. But before I do that, I want to thank you all. I am a veteran myself, but I want to thank you all for the service that you did, the service and the sacrifices that both you and your families made in the service of this country. It is with a true open and honest heart and heart of gratitude that I want to bring that to you, that thank you, because the lives that we lead today are due to that service and the sacrifices that you made. So it's not lost on me. So thank you for that. Now let's get into the presentation. I want you to stop what you're doing. I know that a lot of the time when you're watching presentations like this, you've got other things going on. You've got your cell phone beside you and you're checking social media. You're maybe chatting on a chat off to the side on the computer or on the phone. What I want you to do is just stop for a second and just focus very intently on this. But also what I want you to do is think about one thing that is causing you personally stress, anxiety, or possibly even some level of sadness. And don't worry, I'm going to bring you out of this here in a second, but I want you to think about that. It might be finances. It might be a family relationship. It might be school for your kids. It might be picking up and dropping up your kids at softball or whatever the case may be. It may be the fact that, oh man, I forgot that there's a PTA meeting tonight, that kind of thing. I get it. I experience a lot of that same thing. Now, what I want you to do while you're thinking about that is notice what your body is doing. Notice what your mind is doing. Notice what your nervous system is doing. You might start to feel that tension that I mentioned in your shoulders, maybe in your forehead, some sweating, maybe in your palms. That's your body reacting to a threat. I'm going to get into the science a little bit here in a little bit, but that in and of itself is mindfulness, being aware of your body's reaction to a threat. But a lot of what we experience today as quote unquote threats, it's not actually a threat. We perceive it as such, but it's not. It might be email. It might be traffic. It might be that softball game or the PTA meeting. We see it as a threat and our body responds the same way as though it were in fact a life-threatening threat. But most of them aren't. So that said, now what I want you to do is take a few breaths. And I want you to do it with me and in a certain way. We're going to do a method called box breathing. And it's actually something that I learned early on in my military career, though I didn't know the science behind it. And I didn't know why I would later use it in my life. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a sec. But what I want you to do is I want you to take with me, once I get it started, is take a breath in for a count of 4. So that's the edge of the box, the first edge. Then we're going to hold that for a count of 4. So that's the top of the box. Then we're going to breathe out for a count of 4. So that's the other side of the box. And then we're going to hold for a count of 4. And that's the bottom of the box. Okay. And if you feel like doing so, you can close your eyes, but be comfortable, whatever that looks like for you, comfortable and safe. And for the sake of this presentation, just to make sure that it doesn't cut off while I'm doing this presentation, I'm going to keep my eyes open. But I do encourage you, if it's comfortable and safe, for you to close your eyes. It really helps to focus on the breath. So let's begin by breathing out as much air as you can. And that's not part of the box breath. Go ahead and breathe out, empty your lungs. Now, deep breath in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing out for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. That's 1. We're going to do it a few times. In for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Out for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, in for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. Out for 4, 3, 2, 1. And finally, hold for 4, 3, 2, and 1. Now, take a look at, quote unquote, how you feel. Take stock in how your body, your mind, and your nervous system has changed since you were thinking about whatever it was before, whatever it was that stressed you out, caused you anxiety, or maybe even some sadness. And if you feel like doing so, if you're open to it, throw it in that chat. I'd love to hear how you feel different. You may feel that your mind is calmer, that any tension that you may have felt in your shoulders or your forehead or the sweating in your palms, it may have completely gone away. And that is what box breathing, simple breathing exercise, can do for your body, your mind, and your nervous system. It helps you to calm down. So what we did initially, focusing on that stressor, whatever that stressor may be, and we paid attention to it, that reaction is part of your autonomic nervous system kicking in. The autonomic nervous system specifically here that's kicking in, the part of it is the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is also known as the fight, flight, or freeze nervous system. It's the one that is there to defend us from the threats. What we just tapped into by doing that box breathing exercise is the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the other side of the autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic, or rest and digest, is there to calm us down. That brings us back into the green, if you will. That allows us to be more focused on the here and the now. And that's where we want to live most of our lives, is in that green, so that when we do in fact need to tap into that red or the sympathetic or the fight, flight, or freeze nervous system, let's say if there is in fact a saber-toothed tiger trying to attack us, or a robber around the corner bringing a knife to us, we want to react at that time. We want to actually be able to tap into that sympathetic nervous system. But if we are constantly living in that state of red, we're not going to be able to make that move. And Ken and I were actually just talking about this before. We were talking about in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, how that some folks can go into the fight with their heart rate way up high already. But if you're able to bring yourself down into the green, you're actually going to be more responsive and more in control. So that's where we want to live most of our time. And that you can do that simply by just doing some simple box breathing. And we're going to do a more in-depth meditation towards the end of this, but I wanted to introduce you to that. Now, funny enough, I learned this on the shooting range in the SEAL teams early on. Now, what we're trying to do is calm our heart rate down, calm our respiratory rate down, so that we could shoot better. We could shoot in between heartbeats, and we could shoot in between breaths, so that we were more accurate on the shooting range. Now, nobody ever told me all the science behind it between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest versus fight, flight, or freeze. I just took it at face value. Hey, my instructors were telling me what to do. I was doing my breathing. Now, the side effect, quote unquote, side effect of this is that it helps you to calm down, yes, in the moment, but it also helps you to think differently. Think differently in the moment, and ultimately think differently in your life. You see things through a different lens. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. All right, so moving on. So why do we do that? One, I get nervous. As Ken mentioned, I get nervous before I talk to a group. So this was my way of calming myself down in the moment right here before you. So I appreciate the grace in offering me the opportunity to calm myself down as I present to you guys. Second, I wanted to talk to you about the two different sides of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Third, I wanted you to be focused on the presentation and know that there is something to it. It's not just this woo-woo stuff that the hippies, monks, and weirdos do, right? It is in fact something that is real, and there's science behind it. So that's why I start the presentation off that way. Now, Ken covered briefly a little bit about me. I'll delve a little bit more into it. My background is I was actually born in South Africa. I lived in South Africa until I was 7, moved to the States when I was 7, specifically to Louisiana, grew up there, enlisted in the Navy first. I was a parachute rigger in the Navy, and then got picked up from the enlisted ranks to go to the Naval Academy, again, as Ken mentioned, in the great class of 2001. And from 2001 onward, I served within the Naval Special Warfare community, specifically getting pinned as a Navy SEAL in 2003, and then doing what most SEALs do when they retire, teaching meditation. And obviously that's a joke. That's not what most SEALs do. You don't typically see or think of a Navy SEAL or a special operator of any sort, or even a military representative of any sort, going from serving in the military to teaching mindfulness and meditation. So there's normally a big question as to how I got from being the SEAL to doing what I do now, teaching this meditation. Well, I personally had my own struggles in the Navy SEAL community within the Navy. We had one particular operation where we lost a lot of guys, and that caused me a lot of anxiety, stress, survivor's guilt, moral injury, imposter syndrome, and depression, to the point where it affected me personally and professionally, and mentally and physically. And I sought a lot of help, and I got a lot of help at the bottom of the bottle initially. Obviously, that didn't last the way that I wanted it to. It numbed the pain, but it also had a lot of detrimental effects and caused more depression long term. I sought help from professionals, and a lot of them gave me medication instead of meditation. And finally, I had someone that was bold enough to say, you know what, maybe you should try out meditation and mindfulness. And at first I was like, Doc, I'm this rough and tough Navy SEAL. I don't do meditation. Meditation, again, is for those kind of weirdos. And he's like, well, Jon, what if I had something that I could give to you that was going to improve your performance personally and professionally, mentally and physically? And I was like, heck yeah, Doc, whatever that is, I'll take that pill. Because as a special operator, we're always looking for an edge over our enemy on the battlefield, or an edge over our buddy right next to us, right? We want to perform better than them. So he was speaking my language now. Performance enhancement, heck yes, I'll take that. Well, guess what? It wasn't a pill. The performance enhancement that he was selling me was mindfulness and meditation. And I say those two words, mindfulness and meditation, they are two different things, and we'll get into that here in a second. So I was like, okay, Doc, I'll take your word for it. I'll try it out. If it's going to improve my performance, I'll take it. So I went home, downloaded a meditation app, and the next morning, being a type A personality, I sat down and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to delve right into this hour-long meditation. And about 17 seconds into this meditation, my mind was on my to-do list. My mind was on the fact that the car needed an oil change, or that the dog needed to go to the vet, or that I needed to answer these emails at work, or X, Y, and Z, whatever was on my to-do list. My mind was everywhere except on this meditation. So I came out of this meditation probably 5 minutes into it, angry and frustrated. And I went back to that doctor and I told him, hey, that meditation stuff that you told me about it's exactly what I've always thought about it. It's for the weak. It's weird. It doesn't work. I personally cannot do it. And he came back. He's like, oh, well, how did you get started? And I said, well, I sat down for an hour-long meditation, and my mind was everywhere except on this meditation. He's like, well, wait, you tried to do an hour-long meditation day one? No, that's like lining up at the starting line of a marathon without ever having run a mile before, or like going into the weight room and getting under 350 pounds on bench press without ever having lifted weights before. And now, I've never personally been able to lift 350 pounds, but I understood what he was talking about now. I was like, okay, so I've got to start small. So where do I start, Doc? He's like, well, let me introduce you to this method called box breathing. And I was like, whoa, box breathing? I do that on the shooting range. He's like, yeah, well, why don't you try that in your everyday life? Try it when you're getting stressed. Try it when you're getting anxious. Try it when you're getting frustrated. And I did. I started doing it regularly. And it started to change the way that I felt about things. And I started to see improvement in my performance like it promised me, but I also started to see decrease in the depression, the anxiety, the stress. Now, it didn't go away, but I was given a tool that allowed me to process it in a more healthy way, to get through it, to see to the other side of it, rather than boxing it up and putting it aside as though it wasn't actually affecting me. So I attribute mindfulness and meditation to changing my life for the better, but also, quite honestly, saving my life. So that's how I got from being the SEAL into teaching this quote unquote hippy dippy weirdo stuff. So moving on. All right. So I know a lot of us pride ourselves on our ability to multitask. And multitasking is the exact opposite of being mindful. What you're actually doing is task switching. You're task switching hundreds of times, maybe even thousands of times a day. So you're switching from the text that you just sent via your phone to the PowerPoint that's in front of you, to the email, to the boss that you're trying to talk to thinking about your kids, to thinking about the stock market, whatever. You're multitasking, most likely, or attempting to. And again, I say attempting to because there's no such thing as real multitasking. You're task switching. You cannot focus on more than one task at a time, more than one complex task at a time. Now, sure, you may be able to walk and chew bubble gum. You may be able to like drive and listen to the radio, right? But you're not focusing on more than one of those at a time. So multitasking, what I encourage people to do rather than multitasking is switch to monotasking. And now you're like, well, what does this have to do with anything? Well, monotasking, focusing on the one task at a time, is being mindful. You're actually going to tap into that flow state or the zone more often, and you're going to be more productive, more effective, more focused at whatever it is you're doing, but you're also going to get a sense of fulfillment. You're going to get a sense of happiness out of it, more likely than if you're trying to do 100 things and only accomplishing maybe 3 of them. You go home at the end of the day feeling better about what you got done at work, what you got done in the job place, the gym, whatever. You start to feel better about it. So actually being monotasking regularly can change the way that you feel in your skin, in your mind, in your body, and in your nervous system. So coming back to what we thought about at the very beginning of the presentation, some of you guys may have been thinking about things similar to what is on this slide, right? What's for dinner, the stock market, relationships, whatever. This is a form of multitasking. And in corporate America, that multitasking, even if you're not physically attempting to multitask, you're multitasking in your mind. As you try to multitask in your mind, that adds up. The seconds, the milliseconds in between switching from your phone to your email, to your PowerPoint, to your boss, to whatever, that adds up to time. And again, in corporate America, that adds up to money. But really what I care about, the piece that I care about, is the stress that causes. That multitasking causes, or the attempt to multitask causes stress. And we want to reduce that stress, because as you reduce stress, you're going to increase your grit and your resilience, your preparedness and your compassion. And those 4 things combined, that is what makes healthy teams and healthy leaders. That's what makes elite teams and elite leaders. Preparedness, resilience, grit, and compassion. And you can increase all of those through reducing stress. All right, so mindfulness and meditation, it can take those things that are all over the place, separate them, reduce the multitasking attempting, and really help to bring that stress level down, again, increasing those other areas. It can also help, as you may have noticed, the relationship picture there changed from one that's very stressful to one that's more where we want our relationships, kind of healthy and helpful to one another. It can improve your relationships, and not just your romantic relationships, but your relationships with your friends, your colleagues, and the relationship that you have with yourself by practicing mindfulness and meditation. Okay, so I've said mindfulness a lot. What is mindfulness? Well, it's defined as the process of being actively and intentionally aware without being judgmental. And when I say intentionally aware, I mean intentionally aware of what it is you're feeling physically in your skin, and feeling emotionally in your mind, what it is you're feeling in your heart, and not judging that. So when I say not judging, you may feel sadness, and that's okay. You can feel sadness in the moment. Be present with it. Be okay with it. Don't judge the emotions that you're experiencing. Don't judge the physical feelings that you're feeling. Okay? So that's what mindfulness is. So I don't know if you guys remember, but in math, now I'm a math major, so I saw a lot of this, but we had Venn diagrams, which were like the circles with one thing over here and another thing over here and the overlap between them, blah, blah, blah. Mindfulness is in one circle. Mindfulness is that definition at the top there, but it's also a way of life. Mindfulness is a way of living. Now, the other side of the Venn diagram, the other circle, is toes. Now, I know that's not the other side of the circle. We're going to get into the other side of the circle in a second. But what I want you to do to practice mindfulness is wiggle your toes. Wiggle your toes right now. I'm wiggling mine. Hopefully you're wiggling yours and I'm not alone in doing this. Now, what I'm doing, what I'm feeling, I'm actually paying attention to, and maybe you're doing this too, you're paying attention to the physical sensation in your toes. When's the last time you paid attention to that physical sensation in your toes? Most of us don't pay attention to that. Most of us don't pay attention to that. Most of us don't pay attention to the physical attributes, aspects of breath, the actual rise and fall of our chest, belly, lungs, diaphragm, the feeling of the air coming into and exiting our body. That is being present in the here and now, paying attention to the physical feelings. That is mindfulness. That is the way of life of mindfulness. Mindfulness is being like your dog. If you have a dog, you know that dog didn't wake up this morning thinking about the to-do list, thinking about what he or she needs to do later today, or what he or she screwed up yesterday. No, what they're thinking about is right here, right now. There's this great meme that you can look up online, and it's got a guy, he's walking a dog, and it's got the little thought bubble coming out of the guy's mind, and it's got the thought bubble coming out of the dog's mind. And in the guy's thought bubble is everything that he has to do today. It's again, the taxes, the oil change, the emails, the traffic, the PTA meetings. It's got everything all jumbled up. And it says mindfulness, spelled with full, F-U-L-L in the center. And then it shows the dog's thought bubble. And the dog's thought bubble is the exact same image of what we see. It's him, the dog, and the owner walking side by side in the imagery that we're seeing. That is mindfulness, being aware of your surroundings, being present in the here and now, in this time, in this space. That's mindfulness. So be more like your dog. Now, coming back to the Venn diagram, the other side of that, again, is meditation. Mindfulness is the way of life. This circle over here, meditation. Meditation is a formal practice where you set aside the time very intentionally to meditate. Now, that meditation may be focusing on your breath. That meditation may be focusing on a mantra. That meditation may be focusing on a body scan. There's lots of different types of meditation. Now, you bring these two circles together where they overlap. That's mindful meditation. That is setting aside the time intentionally to be focused on the here and now, the physical and emotional sides of things without judgment. Now, as you practice meditation, your mindfulness, your living this way is going to improve and increase. And as you live mindfully, your ability to meditate is going to increase. And what that does for you in the long run, it does a lot. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. Now, your brain is an amazing organ. Now, I know I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence here. We all know that the brain is amazing, but the science behind it is that we have synapses and neural pathways in there, and that's where messages get passed. And as we think the same thoughts over and over, and as we have the same emotions over and over, we really develop these superhighways in our brain, these neural pathways. They get more and more ingrained in us, and it becomes part of our personality, which is very hard, but not impossible to shift. There is a thing in our brain, an attribute of our brain called neuroplasticity. That's the ability to change the way that we think, that change the way that we see things, quite literally through our eyes, but also through our minds. And I've got this video that I'm going to show you guys to show you and really drive home that point. Now, it does have sound, and I'm going to have to switch from my mic to the sound of the video. So just bear with me as we do shift here. Stand by 1 second.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. That damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels. Every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. You didn't understand. So, this way. Okay. All right, that's second. All right, so, whenever you're ready. Wait. No, you have to keep your feet on. All right, good to go. Wait. Like, you gotta start rolling at least. And go. Oh, no! All right, back up. Okay, now. Keep your feet on the pedal. Go. Go right on. Just keep your feet on the pedals. Hands on. Yeah, come on. All right, one more time.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck, but at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut.
Are you going to give up?
No.
Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up. You got it. Did you see his brain get it? So in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity, am I even saying that right, than an adult.
It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child.
All right, today's bike log. I can ride smooth, I can ride fast. I'm thinking the experiment is over. Okay, now I'm in Amsterdam, a city that has more bicycles than people. The question is, can I ride a normal bike now? I mean, I've spent all this time unlearning how to ride a bike. If I go back and try to ride a normal one, will my brain mess up? So I've tweeted a Smarter Everyday meetup, if you will, and I'm gonna see if somebody brings a bicycle and I'm gonna try to ride a normal bike. It's backwards.
This was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. I had ridden a normal bike since I was 6, but in this moment, I couldn't do it anymore. I had set out to prove that I could free my brain from a cognitive bias. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that all I proved is that I can only redesignate that bias.
So what you're not seeing is just a group of people here looking at me, looking at the strange American that can't ride a bike because they think I'm dumb. But I'm actually 2 levels deep into this because I've learned and unlearned. All right.
After 20 minutes of making a fool out of myself, suddenly my brain clicked back into the old algorithm. I can't explain it, but it happened in a very specific moment.
I got it. I'm back. Oh, it clicked. Hold it, it clicked. I got it. Okay, there it is. There was the moment. Okay, I can ride a bike.
I tried to explain this to the people around me, and they just didn't get it. They thought I was faking the previous 20 minutes, and I couldn't get anybody to believe me.
That looked like I faked that, didn't it?
Yeah.
Just a fake. You think I'm faking. You don't believe me.
This is so weird. You were like, la, 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 and it's
You think I'm lying, don't you?
I do.
I'm not lying.
I felt like the only person on the planet who had ever unlearned how to ride a bike, and I couldn't articulate it to anyone because everybody just knew that you can't forget how to ride a bike. So I learned 3 things from this experiment. I learned that welders are often smarter than engineers. I learned that knowledge does not equal understanding. And I learned that truth is truth, no matter what I think about it. So be very careful how you interpret things because you're looking at the world with a bias, whether you think you are or not. I'm Destin. You're getting smarter every day. Have a good one.
Okay, if you want to support Smarter Every Day, you can download a free audiobook at audible.com.
All right, so that right there shows the neuroplasticity that I was describing before. It's the ability to change the way that we think or feel about things. And we can do that intentionally, and we can do that through meditation. Now, coming back to the presentation, the mind, we have somewhere between 50 and 75,000 thoughts a day. 50 to 75,000. Pretty amazing. But when you really break that down, a lot of those thoughts are the same thoughts we had the day before. So we wake up with our phone, right? A lot of us use our phone as our alarm clock. Wake up with our phone, we roll over, we turn off the alarm, or we may hit that snooze button once or twice, right? So then once we're done hitting snooze, we turn over, grab the phone, start zooming through, or rather scrolling through social media, seeing what came in through the night, looking at our notifications, looking at our email, looking at our bank accounts. A lot of us do that same thing. Then we may get up in the morning from that, out of bed, and we go brush our teeth, take care of our bio needs. We get into the car, drive the exact same way to work. We have the same thoughts over and over. Now, those thoughts, those automatic ones that we don't really think about, take those out. Now we have another bunch of thoughts that we still have the same way every day. And a lot of those are negative. Like we stare at ourselves in the mirror and we're like, oh man, I put on too much weight, or I'm starting to age, or I don't do things well at work. We start thinking negative things about ourselves. That's the negative self-talk. That is naturally wired into us through what's called the negativity bias. The negativity bias makes us survive. And now it's wired into us from when we were old cavemen and women, ancient cavemen and women, when we would go out from the caves and we would go looking for food. If we assumed that there was a saber-toothed tiger around the corner, let's say, for instance, if we assumed that and we were wrong, we lived. If we had thought the other way, if we assumed that there was not a saber-toothed tiger around the corner and there was in fact one, it made for a bad day, right? We may not actually live. We may not propagate the species. So it's wired into us to survive as individuals and then ultimately to help to propagate the species. But in today's day and age, that negativity bias, that makes us see things, again, coming back to the emails, the traffic, the social media, the text messages as threats when they're not in fact threats. And we perceive them that way because we're trying to save ourselves and propagate the species, but it doesn't make sense in today's day and age. So we can change that through meditation. So what's actually happening here in meditation? Here's our brain, this little red piece, that's about the size and shape of an almond. That's the amygdala. That little guy right there is in charge of the fight, flight, or freeze reaction rather. It's the one that's in charge of the sympathetic nervous system. That controls so much of that negativity bias. That puts us into the red more often than we need to. Well, in meditation, what takes over is this corpus callosum and this prefrontal cortex. I'll touch on the prefrontal cortex first. The prefrontal cortex of our brain, that's the part of our brain responsible for rational thought, cognitive thought. It is responsible for making decisions that make sense. And that is where we want to live more often, is in that prefrontal cortex. And the lining between that little guy, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex is actually thickened as we sit down to meditate and our mind wanders off, and then we notice that our mind has wandered off, and we come back over and over and over to the meditation and refocus and refocus and refocus. As we stop trying to multitask and be focused on one thing at a time, the lining between those two, the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, that's thickened, and you start making decisions more often with the rational part of your brain. You respond more often than react. The other side, the corpus callosum, that's the part that brings both of our lobes together, the right and left lobes of our brain. A lot of us are very focused on data, analytics, but we're not in touch with ourselves, in touch with our own emotions and what's happening. We're not in touch with the emotions and what's happening around us. We're not creative. Well, as we thicken that corpus callosum, we actually start to think with both sides of our brain more often, tapping into creative solutions, tapping into that emotional intelligence so that we can be better leaders, so that we can practice that compassion at work, so that we can practice that compassion at home, so that we can practice that compassion with ourselves. So meditation, scientifically, biologically, and physiologically changes our brain, changes our body, and changes our nervous system, and allows us to live in a much more healthy way, much more fulfilling way. So that's the science behind it. Let's talk about some of the benefits here. So one, I talked about it reducing stress. As it reduces stress, it increases your resilience, your grit, your compassion, and your preparedness, all of which I believe are key attributes in elite teams and elite leaders. Touched on the resilience, but specifically what's happening there. Decrease the stress, but you're also more aware of what's going on around you. You see things in a different way. You see obstacles as just that, obstacles. They may be temporary setbacks. They may knock you down, but you get back up. As you start to meditate more often, you increase your ability to be resilient. It can decrease your body fat. As you decrease the stress hormone cortisol, that can in fact decrease your body fat. Your blood pressure is normally more regulated with practicing meditation. Your brain function is better as you start to focus more and more often. You lose focus, but then you come back. You lose focus and you come back. You're actually exercising your brain. It's like mental push-ups. You start to change the way that your brain is wired. You start to be more focused. You start to have better memory, and you actually reduce the chance of dementia and Alzheimer's through meditation and living mindfully. It can change addiction. Addiction is really nothing more than a deeply ingrained neural pathway. And we talked about that neuroplasticity before. As you increase with meditation and mindfulness, your brain becomes more plastic, and your ability to change it and rewire it happens, and that decreases your addictions. Increases your depth and duration of sleep. And as many of us already know, as we lacked sleep in the military, we sometimes didn't make the best of decisions. We sometimes didn't feel that great. Well, as you increase your depth and duration of sleep, everything else starts to fall into place. You start making better decisions. You start eating healthier. You start drinking healthier. It really changes the ball game. Your perception of pain decreases. As you start to meditate, you actually perceive everything around you differently. And that includes pain. Your pain threshold increases, so you're able to do more physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It can increase your pain threshold. Lastly, or not lastly, but another benefit is it can decrease the signs of aging. We have these things in our DNA called telomeres. Telomeres actually protect your chromosomes from aging. Well, meditation and living mindfully actually protect the protectors. It protects the telomeres. And as the telomeres are protected, they're better able to do their job of protecting the chromosomes, and that decreases your signs of aging. Next, mindfulness at work, in teams, and in high-stake environments. How does it come into play there? Now, I don't necessarily encourage jumping on your table at work and meditating like the young lady here is. But hey, if that's what it takes and that's what you're allowed to do, go for it. But here's where it's going to benefit you. One, you as an individual are going to be happier and healthier. As you as an individual become happier and healthier, those around you are going to respond differently. And if the team starts to do this, as they start to meditate, as they start to live mindfully, they become happier and healthier as a team. You're going to have more effective meetings. I know many of us have had meetings just to plan meetings. Well, living mindfully, meditating, some teams actually do this at the beginning of their meetings so that they're more focused. They try to eliminate the multitasking or the attempt to multitask during a meeting. You're going to be more effective. And as you have more effective meetings, I know we are all happier and healthier if we have more effective meetings and waste less time. You're going to have less absenteeism. And when I say less absenteeism, I don't just mean physical absenteeism. You may be there at work physically, but a lot of the time your mind is elsewhere. Well, when you are meditating and living mindfully, you're going to be more present in the here and now. So you're going to be at work physically and mentally. You're going to have that increased focus and productivity. As you're focused on something more often, you're going to tap into that sense of flow, that zone, if you will. And as you do that more and more often, you're going to get that sense of fulfillment at work. And you're going to go home feeling better about your day at work. Ultimately, you're going to be more happier, healthier, and more fulfilled by being more focused, by being more productive. You're going to have better awareness of the now. And that definitely on the battlefield, you want that. We talk about situational awareness or tactical awareness. You want that. Talk about mindfulness and meditation. Everybody's like, okay, weirdo, get away from me. But if you talk about situational awareness, that's a different thing. Or is it? It's really the same thing. So as you practice mindfulness, you're going to be more situationally aware. You're going to be aware of what you have right now, and you're going to be aware of your shortfalls so that you can fulfill your future needs. You're going to have that increased memory. As you have that neuroplasticity, your ability to learn and remember stuff is increased. So as a coworker, as a member of an elite team, an elite organization, and in those high stakes environments, you're going to remember more. You're going to have that better emotional intelligence because you're tapping into both sides of your brain, but you're also tapping into the neural pathways and the neurons that are physically, quite literally, in your heart. So you can start to think a little bit more with your heart, and you're going to have that compassion for your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers, and yourself. And again, which I've hit on, is a critical part to any elite leader and elite team, is that compassion and strong emotional intelligence. You're going to have better collaboration. As you have that compassion, better emotional intelligence, you're going to collaborate better, and you're going to start gelling as a team, which, as you all know, any elite team needs to gel as a team, and you're going to be better. Finally, you're going to be more likely to overcome those obstacles and achieve that desired goal. Overcoming the obstacles, getting past those setbacks, getting back up when you get knocked down, that is resilience. Setting the long-term goals and then actually working to achieve those by breaking those down into sub goals, smaller goals, but ultimately working towards that long-term goal, never losing focus on that, always achieving it. That's grit. As you improve that, your resilience, your grit, coming back to the emotional intelligence and the compassion, coming back to the awareness of the here and now, but also awareness of the shortfalls. That's the preparedness. As you are more prepared, resilient, gritty, and compassionate, you're going to be a better team. You're going to be a better leader. And ultimately, that makes everyone happier and healthier. And it just compounds and spirals in a good way. So these are the effects of mindfulness at work, in teams, and high stakes environments. Now, you may be asking, oh, well, that's great, Jon. Thanks for all this. I appreciate it. How do I get started? When do I do this? Okay, so how do I get started? One, just as simple as the box breath that I showed you. If you do nothing else, the box breath, that's a very powerful tool in your tool belt, the proverbial tool belt. You can really help to feel different at your work, in your life, at home, with your friends, in your relationships. That is a simple tool right there. That is meditation without calling it. It is meditation. You can do something mindful. And what I mean by that is stop at work and have a mindful meal. Turn your computer off, turn your phone off, focus on the meal that's in front of you. Focus on the shapes, the colors, everything that you're seeing. You're bringing in those physical attributes, feeling the meal. What I mean by that is you're actually feeling emotionally what you're seeing, like gratitude for the food that's on your plate. The food didn't just conjure up on your plate. It got there by some work that others did to get it from the farm, the ocean, wherever, to your plate. All right. So having some gratitude, setting aside all that other stuff, focused on the shapes and colors, focus on the smell. That's a mindful meal. If you add that to the box breath, you're meditating and you're being mindful. That's a mindful tool. That's how. Another way might be on your drive to work, maybe shutting off the radio for the last few seconds, the last few minutes, turning off the radio, listening to the rolling of your tires on the road, focusing on the physical side of the seat against your back and against your butt, focusing on the physical side of the steering wheel in your hand. That's going to bring you into the here and now. And take a few deep breaths right before you enter that door. You're going to feel different when you get into that workplace. Flip that on your way home. Do the same thing. Take a few breaths before you enter home and leave work at work. Now you're home. That's being mindful. As you do that, you're going to change the way that you feel about yourself, and in the situations you're in, you're going to live that happier, healthier, more fulfilling life. All right. So when? Me personally, for meditation, I meditate twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, typically 15 minutes or so. I'll do 15 minutes in the morning just to get my mind right before the day starts. And I do that first thing. So I'll roll out of bed. I won't even go turn my phone on. I'll go take care of my bio needs, go sit down, and I will meditate. Sometimes it's a guided meditation. I will use a phone for that, but most often I just use a timer on my wrist, and it will count down for 15 minutes, and I will tune everything else out, be present in the here and now. That's helpful. If you're not down with a silent meditation on your own, there are apps that are out there for guided meditations. Insight Timer, Calm, 10% Happier, Waking Up. If you just get on whatever app store it is that you use and search for a meditation app, you're going to find them. Try those out. Experiment, see what works. So I'll do 15 minutes in the morning. Then after lunch, after a mindful meal, I'll do another 15 minutes, getting me ready for the afternoon. And then if the afternoon has been crazy and I have trouble kind of settling my mind before I go to sleep, I'll do another one, maybe 10, 15 minutes to get ready to go to sleep so that I will have better sleep, more duration, more depth in that sleep, coming back to that slide that I covered earlier. So that's the how and when behind meditation. Now, that said, there you go. I just got the comment from Ken in our private chat here. HelloFresh provides free access to the Headstrong app. Headstrong is another fantastic mindfulness and meditation app. So try that out. You guys have free access to it. So, all right. So that all said, let's jump into a meditation for those who are comfortable doing so. I will run you through a guided meditation now, and then we'll open it up for any questions or comments afterwards. May run a little bit past the hour. So just be a real quick breathing meditation, focusing on the anchor of your breath. So go ahead and get into a comfortable position, whatever that might look like for you. And again, I'm going to keep my eyes open just to make sure this does not drop off. But if closing your eyes is comfortable and safe for you right now, go ahead and do that. I invite you to do that. And let's bring our attention to our breath. And what I mean by that is paying attention to the physical side of the breath, noting the feeling of the breath, noticing where it comes into your body and noticing how that feels as you breathe in. And then the reverse as you breathe out. Where and how is the air as you breathe out? As you breathe in, ideally breathe in through your nose, noticing the feeling of the air, your breath at the tips of your nostrils. And then as you breathe out through your mouth a little bit slower than you breathe in, letting it out nice and slow, paying attention to that physical side. Another deep breath in, noticing how your lungs expand as your diaphragm drops down into your belly. Your chest and belly expand with that. And as you breathe out, the reverse. Your belly and chest shrink, diaphragm rises, lungs shrink. Another deep breath in. Feeling that air at your nose, imagining it going down into your lungs, expanding your lungs, and now breathing out. Nice and slow, as slow as possible. And now holding empty at the bottom, holding empty. Deep breath in, filling those lungs. Now holding full at the top, holding, and now releasing. Nice and slow. And now go ahead and breathe naturally. Don't feel that you have to force it or breathe along with me, but just pay attention to the breath, be aware of it. And if you notice that your mind has wandered off to some other place, some other time, some other space, don't beat yourself up. It's perfectly natural. Your mind is made to think thoughts just like your heart is made to beat beats. Just be aware of it and come back. Bring yourself back to the breath, focusing on the breath. Your breath that is with you all day long, all through the night, and all through your life. Pay attention to that breath. It's the only thing that happens automatically and that we can control. Pay attention to that. Be thankful for it. Be thankful for your breath. And now we'll wrap it up with one deep cleansing breath together. Begin by breathing out as much air as you can. Empty. Deep breath in through your nose, down into your belly first, filling up to your chest, holding at the top and releasing. And as you release, relax, start to bring some movement into your body, rolling your shoulders, rolling your neck, moving your head. And those are some micro movements that you can do throughout the day to also further drive home the mindfulness. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have for you. I will wrap it up there. And I know that there's a little bit of a delay between what I say and what you hear. So I'll ask it, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw those into the chat. I'll be happy to answer. And I know Ken's going to come back up here to wrap it up. And thank you so much, Ken, for bringing me on with your team and for trusting me with your team. I sincerely appreciate you. And again, thank you all for your service. And it's just been an absolute honor to be with you all today in and for Veterans Day. So if you got any questions, throw them in that chat and I'll be happy to answer those. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up here shortly. Ken, I'll turn it back over to you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jon. I'll echo what Will said in the chat. Thanks very much for joining here. I know I couldn't figure out how to set it because I have to create a channel to be able to participate in the chat. So some folks might be trying to do that now.
Okay.
As we were going through, I actually getting towards the end. I was going to ask, okay, so how do we get started on this journey? What's the first step? And then of course that was one of your last slides was that how and when.
Right.
I'm curious to know, do you have any particular books to read or videos to watch?
Oh yeah.
There's the one in particular, obviously, Breath by James Nestor.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the first ones I was going to mention. Yeah, thanks, Ken. Great question, and one that I need to put a slide up for. But so I run a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness with a colleague of mine, And that's actually, I think, where Ken and I reconnected. Was he was listening to one of the episodes where we brought in an author named James Nestor, who has done a great book called Breath, and talks about the benefits physiologically and mentally of focusing on your breath and changing the way that you breathe. There's not a whole lot about meditation in there. He does touch on it, but he talks about the ties in breathing in for 5 seconds and breathing out for 5 seconds, and how important that can be. And for you mentally and physiologically, it's great. So that's a great one. Breath by James Nestor. Anything by Jon Kabat-Zinn. He's kind of known as the father of mindfulness in the Western Hemisphere, Jon Kabat-Zinn. So anything by him. One of the ones that's really, really well known is Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn, or Wherever You Go, There You Are, also by Jon Kabat-Zinn. Let's see. Those are just a few that pop to the kind of front of my head as we talk, but we have a website with that podcast, and I don't want to sound like I'm being too salesy, but if you check out Men Talking Mindfulness, we have a resource website on there, and underneath the resources, we have some books that are highly recommended that are tied to mindfulness and meditation. So be happy to have you use that as a resource. And then you can always reach out to me on jonmacaskill.com. Or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly, as Ken could probably attest, I'm fairly prolific on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have about mindfulness and or meditation.
Good deal. I don't see any specific questions coming in, John. So I think we could probably wrap up. Again, I want to thank you very much for joining us here today on Veterans Day. I guess the official 1-year anniversary of the founding of the Fresh Vets ERG.
Very cool.
Want to thank some of the folks who are probably watching and listening in from the office or from home right now, who were instrumental in getting this ERG up to speed, and allowing us to have events like this. So John, hopefully that this won't be the last. It was great reconnecting with you.
Indeed.
And again, I really appreciate this, sir, and happy Veterans Day to you, and thank you for your service.
And back at you, brother. And again, thank you for this opportunity to be with your team, and thank you all for you guys' service. And thank your families for their service and their sacrifices too. It is definitely more than just us, right? More than just the veterans who serve. So thank you again for the opportunity. It's been great, and I appreciate you. And I'll figure out what happened with the chat there. So Will, thank you. You've somehow cracked the code, you commenting, and I appreciate that. But if you guys want to comment later, it should be available at that link on YouTube later, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have there. So Ken, again, thank you. And until next time, have a great weekend and happy Veterans Day. Take care.